We are back. Expert Restaurant Roundup. It's a Friday, which means we've got somebody we've had on before. Today, we've got the franchise king. He's coming from New Jersey. Got Gary. We'll be back in a second. Gary, so you said it's Occhiogrosso, right?
Occhiogrosso. You get the cigar. You win the cigar.
Is there a cigar? Is there actually a prize?
There is a cigar involved, yes.
So funny story, about 3 weeks ago, I'm in Miami, and I guessed 3 people's age in a row. And the one guy guessed his age. He's like, no, I'm 46. And he goes, crap, I'm 47. And I was right. And I made him give me something, a prize. He had this little book in his bag. I'm like, you got to give me something, bro. I just won.
Yeah.
So Gary, tell everybody who you are, where you hail from, and what you do.
All right. Well, Gary Occhiogrosso, folks in the franchise industry know me as a New Yorker, now transplanted in New Jersey, which we love it here. And, been in the franchise business now going into my 33rd, 34th year. Started out as a franchisee of Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
That's sort of where I cut my teeth in the franchising business. Originally was in the radio business for bunch of years before that. And when I sold my shop, I became a franchise consultant. Someone said, you should be a franchise consultant. Now, obviously, there's a little bit more from, being a franchisee to being a consultant. While I was with Dunkin' as a franchisee, I was on their advisory council.
Okay.
I was on their advertising committee. So I really learned the franchise business from a brand that, and back in the 80s, obviously it wasn't as big as it is now. But the brand was still pretty big. They had over 2,500 units. So, understanding the relationship between the franchisee and the franchisor, and knowing that I could bring some insights to emerging brands and startup brands, I actually became a consultant. And some of the brands that I launched as a consultant, one in particular, really blew up. We sold it to a private equity firm, and they asked me to stay on. And so I was gainfully employed for a number of years, but then struck out and created Franchise Growth Solutions, which basically is a cooperative of franchise executives designed to provide insight, support, and assistance to startup franchisors and emerging brands, typically who are not in a budgetary situation to go out and hire all this, infrastructure, but they are in a position to bring it in on an at-will basis. And it allows them to supply services to their franchisees that even though they're a startup, they can still supply services to their franchisees as if they have 1,000 units already. And that's just one of the things we do. We get involved in franchise development, franchise sales, private equity, and all sorts of good stuff in the franchise business.
Okay, cool. I've got 2 questions queued up here for you. I've got who should not franchise, because I come across brands all the time, and it's kind of comical to me that I literally on every 2 to 3 month basis will have a conversation with a restaurant that's like, yeah, we're interested in this, this, and this. We're hoping to franchise in the next 6 months to a year. Here's why we're doing this. And then like 5 months later, they're out of business. And I'm like, hold on. How can you, in your mind, when we first started talking, you're talking about franchising, and yet you apparently at that time you're thinking about franchising, didn't have your shit together on the HQ on the first one. So talk about some of the signs, because there's a lot of restaurant owners out there that have these pie in the sky dreams that they want to have 50 of their restaurant, and they've got 1 or 2 right now. Who is the wrong person, or when are they at the wrong point of their timeline of franchising?
Okay, great question. I guess I'll start first by saying that from a macro point of view, it would be any individual, any business owner, but you and I play in the restaurant pond, so we'll talk about restaurants, okay? Yep. It would be any restaurateur that has not embraced the idea that when they become a franchisor or want to enter into franchising, that they are no longer in the restaurant business solely, but that they are in the franchising business. If they are not able to cross that bridge, what happens is they approach the franchising business in the same manner that they approach their restaurant business. And many startup franchisors are entrepreneurs who might have 1 or 2 or 3 restaurants. So they have this very what I call entrepreneurial mindset, and that's fine. That's great. However, when you move into the franchising arena, you have to take that mindset and transition into what we call a professionally managed organization, because your franchisees may not be as entrepreneurial, and they're probably not, and that's why they buy a franchise. So let's start there. Okay. So now assuming they cross that bridge, then the folks that we would, when we do our evaluation and when we do a franchise study and assessment as to whether or not we're going to work with a brand to franchise it, we need to understand their mindset. So that's the first piece that I just mentioned. Very often, if the franchisor is a chef, no disrespect to chefs, I love them, but chefs focus on sort of the flavor profile, the art of what they do, the complexity of what they do. And a lot of that, unless you can teach a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old how to execute that same product flawlessly and consistently, because consistency is a big piece in franchising, then you're not going to have a successful franchise restaurant or a franchise brand. Again, mindset, a lot of chefs, they don't want to know that what they went to school for 195 years can be done by a 20-year-old who's got a summer job in between, college semesters. Okay.
He's a lifeguard. He's a chef at the restaurant, and he's a sophomore in college.
Correct. So I would say, if you cannot cross that bridge to understand that your restaurant is moving into a business model, it's a business model, it's a vehicle, then you should not franchise. So that would be number one, because that starts with the owner of the restaurant, because if it's not in his or her head, the whole thing will collapse. Secondly, I would say that they need to, and it's a lot of work that we do, they come to us. Sometimes we have to unravel what they believe is necessary in order to be a franchisor. And the one thing that they typically miss, again, entrepreneurially minded, is they miss the financial commitment. What does it take to launch a franchise brand? You have to have a good set of operations manuals. And no, it's not, the spiral notebook that you've written down over the years that you give to your chef. It's not. It's a series of about 6 manuals, from site selection, construction, plate builds, recipe, managing the business, HR, marketing. These are things that, again, entrepreneurially minded restaurateurs typically don't have. So you have to have a good set of manuals. Additionally, things like having the FDD written, just going to a franchise attorney and saying, I want to be a franchisor, and having an attorney write a franchise disclosure document can sometimes be detrimental, because the attorney may take the approach that, and it is a legal document, so don't confuse what I'm about to say, but they may drill into that document too much legalese, too many onerous statements designed for attorneys, how attorneys can get. Whereas when we work with an attorney, we look to make that document a selling document. It's a selling tool. It's disclosure, and we want to make sure that things are disclosed properly. So that has a cost associated with it. Creating a professional franchise website or a landing page. No, we're not selling pizza on the franchise page. No, we're not selling sandwiches on the franchise page. We're selling franchises. So although we want to talk about your food and about your product, that's not what we're selling. So again, mindset there. So budget is a big piece of it. And then what it costs to generate leads and sell franchises. So mindset, budget. The next person who should not franchise is someone who is impatient, in the sense that they're impatient to the point where they have total disregard for sort of the universe and how the universe works.
For the process.
I'm an impatient person. I want things to go. But I also understand that if I plant a tree, it's not growing 40 feet a year. If that's my expectation, then I'm going to be disappointed. So yes, I'm impatient. I want it to grow. I'm going to water it. I'm going to do everything I need to do to make that tree grow as fast as possible. But I understand it takes 20, 30, 40 years for that tree to grow. Yeah. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you're not ready to franchise if you don't embrace the idea that when someone calls and they're interested in the franchise, just because they call doesn't mean they're going to become a franchisee. That cycle might take 90, 120, statistically it's 150 days. And you might be saying, oh, when is this guy going to buy, or when is she going to close this deal? And if that's your mindset, you shouldn't be franchising, because what happens, the default to that is you push the deal and you either lose the person, or you push the deal and you bring someone in who ultimately is going to be harmful to the brand because they're not the right person. So I would say, again, mindset, money, patience, and then the end in mind. What is your, if you want to franchise your business, that's great. But what's the end? What's the end in mind? What's the kiss at the end, as I call it? Because if you're just kind of blowing and going and we're selling and you don't know what 5 or 10 years is going to be, or what it looks like, or where you want it to be in 5 or 10 years, you're not aiming at anything. You're just you're rudderless. You're just rowing the boat. Okay.
Well, the one thing I've seen there is, when I look at some of the people I know that talk about franchising, and I've asked them, well, why? Well, I want to get 10 restaurants and I want to do this. I'm going to open 5 next year and 5 the year after that. And literally 20 minutes ago, I did a video. We do on Fridays, we film what we call tweet videos in our office, where I have a tweet for the prior couple weeks, and then we film a quick 30 to 60-second video on it. And one of my videos was talking about taking actions now, but understanding that action's not going to have a payoff for 5 years. And that's something I'm big with the marketing world, is that too many businesses are constantly looking for what's going to impact my sales tomorrow. Well, that was something you did 2 years ago. And the video I did today was talking about my podcast. So I've got 5 podcasts now, one of them that I do 5 episodes a week of every morning. And I don't look at the stats of that podcast. A friend of mine has a podcast. He's like, oh, I don't have this many downloads. I've been doing it for 2 weeks. I said, dude, turn off the stats. Look at it in 2 years. If you're doing a podcast for the stats now, you already lost. And so for me too, if you're franchising a restaurant for the success, like you said, in 6 months or a year, and you've got somebody that, hey, I'm selling them a franchise, I'm selling them a contract, and when are they breaking ground, or when is their building going to be done? The person that probably rushes into that isn't going to be a very good franchisee on your end either.
Yeah, precisely. No, you're absolutely right. So, and by the way, that's I've only answered half of that question. The half that I've answered of who should not franchise has only been focused on the franchisor, the person. Yep. Okay. Now let's talk about the business. Okay. Yep. So
is the product franchisable? My next question.
Well, okay. So, you need to have an operating model. Let's start there. Okay. So if you have an idea and it's on paper, that's not really franchisable. And again, I don't know if that's the real word. We use that word, franchisable. If we were doing an assessment, first thing we're going to ask a potential franchisor is, do you have a working model? How long have you been in business? Are you profitable? We're going to go through P&L. We're going to assess, okay, you might be making 20 points on the bottom line, which I guess, in the restaurant business, you could be happy with that because maybe you're leasing a couple of cars on there or whatever you're doing. But when I add royalties and brand development funds and fees and the marketing, is all of a sudden that bottom line, that EBITDA line, 9 or 10 or 12%, I'm not so sure somebody's going to be so compelled to invest in buying your franchise if they're going to make 9 or 10% on the bottom line. I mean, hell, even in a crappy stock market, if I bought Apple Computer, I'm going to be up. Okay. So is it franchisable from a financial point of view? We look at sales to investment ratio. If you have a restaurant doing $600,000 a year and it costs $500,000 to build, not franchisable. No. Looking for at least 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio, preferably at least 3-to-1.
Okay.
If that bottom line is not 15, 16, 17, 18%, probably not franchisable. If you are an operator and This doesn't mean you're not franchisable. It just may mean you're not franchisable yet. If
Yes.
you're an operator and you can't tell me your cost of goods, food, paper, beverage, theoretical food cost, actual food cost, what's my cost of labor? If you have 193 things on the menu and only 20 of them are actually selling, then you need to clean up your menu because your cost of goods is going to be up, your ability to train people. Again, this kind of goes back to the chef mentality, like, no, every item on the menu is one of my babies. I can't get rid of one of my babies. So understanding your business, what does it cost to build a location? Do you have a prototype? Can you tell me how to build your restaurant and tell me right down to the paint chip number from Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore? So until you can do that, and by the way, because I'm obviously illustrating here, that's part of what we do when we when we do a franchise development. But if they don't believe that's important, then they're not ready to franchise.
Well, it's funny. Some of the things you said there brought back some memories because, as you know, we've got our Mercedes vans on the road that are, the separate part of our entity out, capturing the stories of the restaurants, and we're growing the America's Best Restaurants TV show. And last summer we had the 2 vans, and last summer I had a company approach me who I know pretty well for the restaurant business and was gung-ho on, we need to franchise this. And I had people calling me wanting to buy a franchise from me. I'm like, well, we're not a franchise. Like, I don't know that we ever will. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I looked at it and I remember kind of thinking through it. And I had the second van on the road, and we put the second van on the road too quick because we hadn't figured out the first van. And I remember thinking about that, like thinking, man, had I listened to a few people that wanted me to franchise this, and I had people lining up ready to give me a check to be a franchise. And I'm thinking, man, if I was dumb enough to have taken that check, where would I be? And I think I've seen restaurant franchises that shouldn't be franchises. The corporate office is in disarray. There's no leadership. There's no manuals. You go in 5 locations. They all look different. And so I think that's a key element from the leadership standpoint. I remember when I talked to a guy, he said, is this going to be franchisable? He's a guy that I know, like, and trust that wants to be involved in our company. I said, there's a chance. I said, but honestly, I personally want to get 18 to 24 months of not testing, but that concept, that van is the van number 1, for example, which is up on its way to Buffalo for Wingfest next week. I want to get van number 1 to where I know without a doubt over the course of 12 months, what we put in each month, what comes out every month. Once I have 12 to 18 months of that specific data, then I'm going to go from that van to the second van doing better, and van 3 and 4. When I've got 4 of my own rocking and rolling, no ifs, ands, or buts, at that point, I'll say, okay, is there an advantage to me to franchise, or should I just do it myself? But I think that's one thing I've seen is that people franchise stuff and they're doing it for the wrong reasons. It's a somewhat a get rich quick scheme, I think. Like, I know one franchise, I won't mention the name, but this brand had, like, at one point, from what I understand, like 40 or 50 people under contract to be franchises. They had 5 or 10 open, and the 5 or 10 that opened sucked. There was no corporate store. And I'm like, you're selling this almost to me seems like some kind of fraud. That you're selling something that isn't proven, but there's always somebody dumb enough to write a check, right?
Unfortunately, yes. And, you hit on a couple of things, why franchise? For me, when a founder of a company tells me they want to create legacy and create generational wealth, and that's what they're doing, that's why they want to build a big brand, that's a great reason to franchise. If they want to bring to the world what they've created, but they understand that they don't have the capital and the manpower to do it, then obviously franchising is a great way to do it because it's an asset-light company. You have no CapEx. You could have 1,000 stores out there, and maybe you only own 2 company stores, and the rest are franchised. Franchisees paid to have it up. Franchisees paid the payroll and keeps it running. So that's a great reason. And then for me, the reason why every business that can be franchised should be franchised, there should never be a question. There is never a question as to whether or not you should franchise your business. There are a lot of people out there that will give you a lot of what they call reasons. I consider them to be complete excuses.
Give me one.
And
Give me a couple.
I say that like kind of with my New York attitude up, because it means that either they don't want to do the work to get their house in order, because you can't sell a franchise to someone if your house isn't in order,
Yep.
as you just pointed out, because you end up with, like you say, all just a mess. And you can't deny the way the financial piece operates. And I'll give this to you in 30 seconds. It's real simple. If I'm running a group of restaurants and I have $1 million on my EBITDA line, that profit, that net cash flow that is driven by company operations, meaning I own them all. I got $5 million in capital assets out on the street. I got 300 employees. I got a lot of headaches. Okay. But I got $1 million in EBITDA. When you sell that company, and we do a lot of resales, you're going to get a 3, a 4, maybe multiple, maybe. If the person absolutely loves what you do, they're going to give you $4 million, $3 million to buy that $1 million in cash flow, and then maybe they'll build it, maybe they won't. When you have $1 million in EBITDA that's driven by royalties,
15x.
There have been 15 and 18s, but I would tell you probably
10, 12,
8, 10. So now you don't have a $4 million company. You got a $10 million company, and you have no money out on the street. You don't own any of those stores. You have no leases. You have no employees. You're very asset light. Okay. So when someone says, I don't think it's a good idea to franchise, I sit there and go, okay, so if you're not doing it for legacy, and if you're not doing it to bring something to the world, and you're not doing it because you want to get that huge kiss at the end, then please help me understand, why are you doing it? Yeah. And they usually don't have an answer.
And I'm a good test subject for that, because I've looked at it, and I've had 3 companies approach us this year about capital infusions, and we're privately funded by, me, myself, and I, and the profits from our marketing firm for the media side of it. That's the franchisable aspect on our business. Really easily is they have a van in every state creating content and media and marketing services for restaurants across the United States. And even somebody said the other day, we need to go across the world. I'm like, okay, well, let me get US first. But what got to my mind was, I said, I don't want to take capital now because I don't have a way to use it effectively. At some point, obviously, we probably will. But I said the other aspect of it is, I look at this, that to me, franchising is the only way I can probably effectively scale what we're doing nationwide in a manner that benefits the end user the best. Because if I go out and open up a van in every state and it's run out of here, we're going to grow at a certain rate. But if I go out and grow this, like we're going to grow it to 4 to 8 vans in the next 18 months, and I prove out exactly that when somebody comes to me and says, Matt, I want to have the franchise for Utah, that I can say, I want to have 100% confidence. And obviously, I know there's the franchise disclosure documents, and you got to have all these things, but I want to be able to say with confidence that, hey, this is the effort that's going to come in. This is the appointments we have to have. The van has to make this many stops. Every stop makes this much revenue. It leads to this much revenue. I want to be able to have a system that really delivers a great product to the restaurants, but then also that franchisee that's servicing that restaurant has some predictability to some extent and knows like what the promised land can be. Because for us, I know that we have a company that can get to a $250 million in value based on having these vans all over the country and our media company, but it ain't going to get there with Matt Plapp. And so I know at some point, I always say at some point we're going to franchise. I just don't want to franchise something that's broken, which honestly right now, I wouldn't say ours is broken. It just hasn't been figured out yet.
Yep. I hear you. Well, you in all of that, you used a word that is key in franchising. And the word you used is system. Yeah. So part of, and there's a great book, it's required reading in my NYU class. I give it away. I give scores of them away every year. It's written by a gentleman named Michael Gerber. Many people have heard of him. The name of the book is called The E-Myth Revisited. Why small business doesn't work and what to do about it. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but the essence of it is that it's understanding the difference between the work of the business and the business. Okay. and understanding that the people who are doing the work of the business, are actually running a system, and the system is running the business.
Yep.
So anything short of that, you've probably just bought yourself a job. And I have firsthand experience of that. My family's business, they owned Italian pastry shops and bakeries, and my dad and my uncles, and they had three of them at one point, two of them most of the time. They didn't really have a business. They worked 6-7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And, they had to close their shop when they took their 2-week vacation. And that's not running a business. A business should give you more time and more money. So, and it should work, by the way, to paraphrase Gerber, it should work as well when you're not there as when you are there. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a system. So again, to get back to your initial question, when should someone not franchise, or when is the product not franchisable, meaning, the business itself, or the concept itself, is when there's no system, when every day people are going into work, and as we say in the restaurant business, they're muscling their way through every shift. There's no rhyme or reason for anything. That's not a franchisable concept. I will add that, from a growth point of view, what makes the best franchises, so to speak, and by best, there's a lot of definitions. The definition I'm going to use is from a franchisee's point of view, not a franchisor's point of view.
Okay. From
the franchisee's point of view, it's concepts where they can own, if they choose, hundreds, thousands if they want. So what goes into that? Two things. Cost of entry. Got to have a low or reasonable cost of entry, because if each unit costs millions of dollars to put up, then the franchisee may not be able to do it. Okay.
Yeah. And the person that's got millions of dollars probably isn't buying all those franchises.
Exactly. So low cost of entry and simplicity of operation. Okay. So if you don't have a system that generally speaking, I'm going to use the term unskilled, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but an unskilled person, not a sous chef or a chef or somebody that's a professional, whatever. Okay. I mean, we know what's working in, the folks that are working in the restaurant business, fast casual, full serve, obviously a little bit higher than that. But for the most part, every piece of that system should be able to be executed consistently and flawlessly by someone who is minimally skilled. Yeah. If you don't have that, that would be another reason that your business is not franchisable, because now you can be held hostage by skilled people who may want more money, may become prima donnas, or they leave, and now replacing that person becomes a chore, and you don't want that. So system is the key word.
What I wrote down, I put system really big. I put number 1, low cost of entry. Number 2, easy to operate. And I put an arrow and said Subway. Now, I don't know.
I was going to use Subway as an example. Perfect example.
To me, that's the first thing that came to my mind, because I've been to Subways across the world, and it's not rocket science. You walk up, you look at the menu, they put the bread on the thing, they put the sandwich down and go on their way. And that's, one thing I look at that I think some restaurateurs I've come across that have 1 or 2 locations, the reason they want to open that franchise, that concept, is they see it as an easier way to make a bunch of money versus working in the restaurant. That's at least been my impression. And I'm like, it ain't. It really ain't. I look at it from my standpoint, and I'm glad you said this, because I know what we're doing with America's Best is impactful, and it's going to be just unbelievable when we get to full speed in about 18 to 24 months. And I also know that I want to share that. It would make me like I've talked to a guy in Florida. He's actually one of our employees in Florida. I said, dude, it would make me nothing happier that in 2 years, when we open up a Florida franchise, that you are the Florida franchise. You've been in the company. You now can go to the next level, have ownership of that, make some money, and then deliver what we do at a high level, because like and trust and believe in the brand. But to me, I think it's the easiest way to get it out there. As far as, like you said, scaling and expanding, I could only do so much on my own. Whereas I get 10 franchises that come in and each get 4 vans. Next thing I know, my dream of 50 vans is out there pretty quickly.
Yep.
But I got to have that system. I got to have that assembly line that when something comes in the beginning and ends at the end, that it goes through systematically and everybody has the same exact experience.
Yep. And again, to get back to the earlier part of this conversation, yes, you have to have that system, but that system also needs to be proven.
Yep.
And it needs to be documented.
Yep.
So, when you listen to people and they talk in terms of when they don't quantify, me when I was running my restaurants and I was a franchisor, what our average food cost was, I would first ask you theoretical or actual. If you said actual, I would tell you 32.5% for this quarter. I knew that number. I didn't say, well, I think it's around 30. Okay. So it's having the system, having it proven and documenting it and being able to quantify it. Because when you sell someone or award someone a franchise, essentially those folks, for the most part, now again, there's different levels of franchisees. There are franchisees who, like I refer to as professional franchisees, they may already own 100 restaurants and now they're looking for a new brand because they're going to share infrastructure. Okay, that's somebody who's going to come in and really ask the questions. But someone who's maybe starting out, first business, they know they can't do it on their own, they're going to bring in a franchise to a great extent. And certainly on a human level, and I realize it's business and there's risk in business, but a lot of those folks are kind of going on faith. They're putting their life or a big chunk of their life in your hands. And if you're a franchisor and you don't take that seriously and you don't want to embrace the idea that, wow, this woman or this guy that's giving me the franchise fee is going to put a mortgage on his house, he's going to quit his job, he's got 2 kids, and I know my model, my concept really sucks. It's not going to make a lot of money. Okay. If you know that, you're evil. Okay. If you know that. Okay. And you're still doing it. You need to view your franchisees. I tell franchisors this all the time, especially ones that have children. I know you've got kids. So what do we want? Ultimately, what do we want for our children? I think in a nutshell, we want more for our children than we want for ourselves. Okay. That's sort of where parents kind of come from. Well, if you're a franchisor, you want more for your franchisees than you want for yourself.
Yep.
Because if you don't, you're not going to sacrifice and struggle and help them. Think about how we struggle and sacrifice and help our kids. You're not going to do that. You're going to go, oh, that's their problem, and they should have known that when they came on board. And meanwhile, they may be working really hard, and they may be working even smart, but the tools you gave them, the system you gave them, wasn't perfected.
Yep.
So
that's one thing I look at with that. When the financial aspect, I had somebody talking about the financial part of franchise. And I said, I look at it from a standpoint that you've got to have a system that, okay, let's say a franchisee can make $250,000 a year net. That's their take home. That's what they're taking. And you as the franchisor are going to make 50. Well, you have an advantage. You can have 100. You've got to have 100 that makes 50. You shouldn't be looking to make $500,000 off somebody making 250.
Exactly.
You should have a system that they can, like you said, the cost to get in is low, the ease of operation, because, you've got to be able to not have too specific of a workforce. They're like, hey, we're building Lamborghini motors. Okay. How do I find that person?
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, who is not ready to franchise? Someone who hasn't embraced the responsibility on a human level of what actually the transaction is about. It's about people, and it's about people's lives, and it's about somebody coming on board as your franchisee who is doing that because they want to better themselves, better their lives. Again, they may be using the franchise model to create generational wealth for their families. Whatever the case, you need to respect that. You need to embrace that. And if this is about, I'm going to get a check from that guy, and I'm going to give him a stack of manuals, I'm going to help him get open, and lots of luck, baby. Here's the machete. There's the weeds. Go chop them down. If that's your attitude, you're not ready to franchise. And unfortunately, not There are not many, but there are people in the franchise industry that unfortunately that's their approach to it. And that's very sad.
Yep. So Gary, if people want to reach out to you, is Franchise Growth Solutions the best place?
The best place is simple. My name, Gary, and it's Gary at Frangrow, FRANGROW, Gary at frangrow.com. Or as I invite people all the time, look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me, Google my name, whatever. I have a big digital footprint. It's impossible for me to hide. So it's easy to connect.
Well, I appreciate your time today, man. Have an awesome weekend. I appreciate you dropping the wisdom. I got my notes, systems, cost of entry, ease of operation, proven and documented. Thank you, sir.
And moral compass.
Oh, I got one more. Moral
Don't
compass.
forget
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
Okay.
Compass. There we go. I got it.
All right, Matt.
I'm ready to rock and roll. Thanks, Gary.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.